If you like AI and you like science, I've got the right one for you today. This is going to be a video about how AI is actually making a difference today in science. Google has created an AI scientist. There's an AI that can read your mind, and AIs know how to design enzymes that can eat plastic. And at the very end, I'm gonna drop one that's not quite AI, but is so cool I just have to. It's about singing mice, or something like that. Hang on for that one. All right, here we go. Let's dive into science and AI today. All right, the folks over at Google Research have released something they're calling Co-Scientist. It's kind of awesome. It's an AI agentic system that acts in kind of the scientific framework. You'll see this in a second. The amazing thing here is this is kind of built to come up with novel ideas and rank them against one another. So it's kind of reading a bunch of research, ingesting a bunch of data as AI can do, and then coming up with novel hypotheses and conclusions from some of the information, and then putting them into an area where they rank with ELO scores, which one serves best, and kind of pitting them against one another to compete. It's actually kind of fascinating, and those that have used it have said that it dramatically increases discovery time. And it really is going to be useful by anyone. Let's take a look at this. All right, they say they have introduced Co-Scientist, a multi-agent AI framework built with Gemini 2.0. It's a virtual scientific collaborator to generate novel hypotheses. And actually kind of interesting here, it's meant as an interactive agent. It's part of the reason they called it Co-Scientist is you can actually have conversations with it while it's doing its work, redirect it, ask more about its findings, send it off to do more research, just like you would any other partner. It's designed to mirror the reasoning process underpinning the scientific method, intended to uncover new original knowledge and to formulate demonstrably novel research hypotheses and proposals, building upon prior evidence and tailored to specific research objectives. So down here, if we look at this animation, you can see that they built a scientist that's made up of these mini scientists, basically. And the idea is the different parts of that agent system have different roles. If you've never seen an agentic system before, the idea is essentially there's intelligent parts that have very specific and intended goals. Those goals are then coordinated, generally in this case by the supervisor agent, that might take some information from the research agent, give it to a review agent to say, was this research good enough? The review agent might kick it back and say, I don't think so. And that kind of iterative process starts to occur. But one of the very interesting things that they've done here is they've also created this tournament system, and they rank with ELO systems, like from a chess ELO standpoint, where things get a higher rating if they defeat certain numbers of things or more advanced hypotheses or findings. So that really starts to speed up the discovery, and it can also theoretically ingest huge amounts of data from other data sources and work through that data kind of as an agent would, or a scientist would, or researcher, frankly, that's feeding the scientific process. As you can see down here, there's a couple places that there's a real iterative process. I won't go into this. It's certainly worth looking at if you have any interest in this kind of thing. I find it fascinating what they've done here, but they've created iterative playgrounds here where certain agents can have coordination with one another, and then those go into, the ranking system and the tournament system that we talked about. One of the things I find fascinating about this one is that it kind of is using an established process that's well-defined. So this is kind of a great footprint for what an agentic system can be and how useful it can be. There's been really serious findings from this already. So it really does show what agentic systems can kind of be. If you know of a process or can imagine defining a well-defined process that is kind of iterative and complex in its structure, but still has a valid outcome, I think that this is kind of a good template to come look at and figure out if this is something you could follow through with to create your own agentic system. In any case, I really do think it's interesting in the way that Google is releasing it and allowing a lot of people to use it, using the 2.0 models. This is excellent. This is really exciting work. This next one comes out of NVIDIA and some of its partners. This week, they announced Evo 2, which is a model, a genetic information model, apparently dramatically larger than the previous Evo 1. It was trained on 9 trillion genetic fragments from 128,000 species across all kinds of life forms, which is kind of amazing. What's really, to me, meaningful about this one is their findings on the BRCA1 gene, which is apparently the tumor suppression gene, one that will kind of keep tumors in check or growth in check. When those mutate, when the BRCA1 mutates, it can become essentially harmful by not doing its job or potentially aiding in the growth, those kinds of things. So it found a 90% success rate in identifying mutations, the ones that were harmful, because it can mutate many different ways, and apparently many of them are not harmful, and finding the mutations that are actually harmful is important. We might be able to focus drug therapies and those kinds of things, even down to the gene level or specific to different people's genes, which could really revolutionize the ideas of how to treat certain kinds of cancer. This one's specifically useful for breast and ovarian cancer, but also other cancers as well. So this was an NVIDIA and collaborators analyzed 128,000 organisms using 2,000 H100s. Also, NVIDIA has kind of released this in their BioNeMo platform as just kind of a microservice, so anybody that uses that platform can use it. Promises to transform the pace of medical and genetic breakthroughs by uncovering intricate patterns buried within data so colossal it would baffle traditional analysis. So this one's excellent. It's just exciting to see that today's AI, not by the end of the year when things will be double at least where we stand right now, today's AI is already finding these kinds of big, meaningful things in people's lives. I can only imagine this is going to lead to really some fundamental changes in science and medicine. So this is really exciting news. Okay, remember when I mentioned that we have AIs that can read your mind? All right, you've hit that story. So Meta this week announced a project that they've been running called the Brain Project, where they're using non-invasive techniques like MRI, fMRI kind of techniques, think the big machines or the hats that people wear, to read essentially brain electricity externally while people typed. It's fascinating to think that we have an idea of how we generate thoughts suddenly. This is, even if we have an inkling of an idea, this is beyond anything I thought I would ever experience in my life, that we would start to understand how, as humans, we create thoughts, turn those thoughts into words, into letters, phrases, and then type them. We're sharing research that successfully decodes the production of sentences from non-invasive brain recordings, accurately decoding up to 80% of characters, and thus often reconstructing full sentences solely from brain signals. Now, we've all heard of these groups that are trying to do implants, to do brain-computer interface, this BCI thing that people are talking about. This really shows that there is at least some potential for being able to get information from the outside, and people that are experiencing things like lock-in or other communication problems, this could be foundationally important to them. So it's very exciting just to hear that we're even making strides in this, much less like an 80% success rate for a specific test. So this clarifies how the brain effectively transforms thoughts into sequences of words. Each year, millions of people from brain lesions prevent them from communicating. AI model decodes up to 80% of what the characters were typed. So let's watch the video.
How does the brain turn thoughts into words? Meta Fair teamed with the Basque Center on Cognition, Brain and Language to unlock this mystery by using AI to decode language straight from brain activity. In 2 studies, volunteers typed sentences while their brain signals were recorded, using 2 non-invasive devices, EEG and MEG. In the first study, our AI model predicted what subjects typed using brain signals alone. MEG scans lead up to an 80% accuracy of character decoding in the best participants, often decoding full sentences solely from brain activity. The second study explored how the brain achieves communication, how neural activity transforms an idea into sequences of words in real time. The researchers' results reveal a clear neural hierarchy in language production. Before producing each word of a sentence, the brain first represents its context, then loads its meaning, and finally represents syllables and letters. By chaining these elements, the brain can seamlessly transform thought into communication. AI and neuroscience are on their way to deciphering the mechanisms of human languages.
Okay, that's fascinating to me. That's fantastic. The idea, just the mere thought that we might be able to start understanding how we're creating thoughts, how they originate. There's an old philosophical discussion of, do we think in language? Is language required? Those kinds of things. And this might lead us even a tiny step closer to helping that conversation to figure out exactly how we form the incredible intelligence thoughts that we have. And of course, even understanding that may lead back to more AI advancements in how we might set up neural networks and things. The circular path here is just fantastic to me. All right, let's get back to being a little nerdy. This one is about being able to extract information from data and like literature and scientific papers, those kinds of things, and compile that information and be able to kind of tease through it instead of having to read all of the papers and understand everything at a depth level. It's called Tables Insight Assistant, which I think it's Insight. I think it's a cute little pun they're trying to make there. It's insights into tables. It's an assistant for it, but it allows researchers to extract structured data from peer-reviewed literature using AI, significantly reducing the manual effort, time, and resources typically taken when conducting literature reviews. Quickly find key data points in literature. Users report substantial improvements in research efficiency, eliminating the need for manual review of full publications. Let's move on. They're using AI and machine learning to unlock the information inside of our own immune systems, the ability to be able to see what immunizations we've gone through or what diseases we've recently been afflicted by just by reading our immune system. It's a novel artificial intelligence system that can access information stored in the immune system about past infections, diseases, and vaccinations, and could be harnessed as a clinical tool for medical diagnoses. So the idea of them being able to focus bespoke solutions for different people dependent upon their immune systems is fantastically interesting to me. This is the malady framework, could one day lead to a single blood test to diagnose multiple diseases. Our study shows it's possible to unlock the hidden information in immune receptor sequences in a robust way for many different types of diseases and immune states. And interestingly, the malady accurately identified the immune status of blood samples from 542 people with COVID-19, HIV, lupus, type 1 diabetes, recent flu vaccinations, and healthy individuals, between what looks like a 96 to 99% accuracy. Kind of awesome, the idea of using our immune system as basically a database of what our bodies have seen and how we react to certain things. So really interesting to see this one. Again, one more time, AI really already in action, and this is just today's AI. Let's check out some mental health. Okay, now into schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, amazingly predicted with some level of accuracy using AI. And these are disorders that the longer they go undiagnosed and untreated, the worse they become. So it's kind of fascinating to have any idea that we have a test for them suddenly. New research shows machine learning could help predict the onset of schizophrenia and bipolar disorder by analyzing routine clinical data from electronic health records. So this is non-invasive. It's not a blood test. It's nothing else. It's just your health records, which is crazy. But it could predict the onset of both within the next 5 years to a reasonable degree of accuracy. The algorithm was able to differentiate between positive and negative cases in the training set 70% of the time and 64% of the time in the test group. Generally, a score of 70% or higher is considered fair to good, but this does depend on specific tests. These findings suggest that detecting goes on to say that these findings suggest that using machine learning on just clinical data to detect the progression of schizophrenia seems plausible. Enzymes, anyone? Okay, full disclosure on this one. I honestly had to go back and forth on literature around this topic for quite a while to get my head around exactly what I was trying to say. I sometimes feel like I really actually need to understand these things before I report them. I'm excited by them, but I want to make sure that I'm not sharing just some optimistic excitement that's non-realistic or is just hype news in some way. And sometimes these take a while, and I'm not exactly equipped for some of the things that I'm reporting here, not surprisingly. I don't know if you could tell, but this one is about enzymes. And my first question is, what the heck is an enzyme? And it turns out an enzyme is a protein. And then the question becomes, well, why do we have two different words? And enzymes apparently are proteins that have a job, is the way that I've been considering it. It's kind of have a particular catalyst kind of reaction to other things effectively. So it's the thing that has an interaction with other things, a protein that has interactions. AlphaFold, the big AI that figured out how to fold all the proteins, or at least huge numbers of proteins a couple years back. It turns out a lot of those proteins are not enzymable. So they're not something that can create interactions with other proteins or substances. Determining which one can work that way and which one can't is a big challenge. And then even better, when you have an enzyme that you're trying to replicate. In other words, what they have done here to prove this is to create a protein or an enzyme that can break down certain kinds of bonds. They have some of these, so they know how they work, but what they need to do is create a lot more of them. But to create them, they have to know how to create the protein in a specific order. So the amino acids, the other things inside of these proteins need to be set up in the right order to have the right chain of events occur. Now, I know I'm really hurting some of y'all out there. I apologize. This is really the best I could do. This is hours of me reading about enzymes and proteins. I'm sorry. This is definitely not my wheelhouse. But essentially, to create these enzymes, to create proteins that can be active for us in ways that we're interested in, we have to be able to create them in a sequence that works. So they basically bind to something, and how it binds to that something is whether or not it interacts with it. So if we look into this, it's an AI-driven protein design that can now be used to generate efficient protein catalysts with complex active sites tailored for specific chemical reactions. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Enzymes are proteins that accelerate chemical reactions under mild conditions, far outperforming what even the best human chemists can achieve. So had I just come down and read that, you would have saved a whole 3 minutes of your life. I apologize. But yeah, so there you go. Enzymes are proteins that accelerate chemical reactions. All right. Generating custom enzymes would allow us to harness nature's efficiency without relying on harsh solvents or fossil fuels. However, traditional enzyme engineering has relied on modifying existing proteins rather than building them from scratch. And this is where it got complicated. Traditional enzyme design is like buying a suit from a thrift store. The fit will probably be a little off. With AI, we can now tailor-make enzymes to ensure a perfect fit for every step of the reaction. Focused on accelerating a specific chemical reaction is what this paper is all about, breaking ester bonds. And very cool, this seems obvious after I learned it, ester bonds, E-S-T-E-R there, is in something that you may have on your body right now, is some plastics, some things that we have many ester bonds, and they're called polyester. So if you have polyester, that's all this is. I know I'm geeking out about the silliest things, and some of y'all are just cringing. I apologize. But so they're trying to break down some of these ester bonds, of course, ester bonds being one of these chemical bonds that are in plastic. If they can break it down, then they can essentially break up plastic with these enzymes that they're trying to create. But creating them is hard. See the aforementioned mess that I just made on the video. I'm sorry. The team confirmed that these enzymes effectively bind and cleave ester compounds as intended. So there you go. I apologize for giving you a just horrible, not even high school level version of chemistry when the gym teacher comes in and tries to teach you chemistry. But this one was very interesting to me to figure out why it was such a big deal that we had things that could eat plastic and whether or not it's, what its efficacy really is. Apparently, there's still really, this is very difficult. There's a lot of different types of bonds, these ester bonds. There's not just one. So they haven't cracked this nut completely. But the fact that they can create these kinds of enzymes directly, intentionally, is really the trick that they're talking about here. All right, you ready for the mice? Okay. Last story here. It doesn't deal with AI. I can pretend and say, oh, there's CRISPR and that must have something to do with all of it. It doesn't. I just liked this story so much that I thought sharing it would be something you would enjoy as well. I'll go quickly through it, but it's kind of awesome in what they're talking about. So this was very recent that this report came out, and it says, eloquent mice point to protein that may have shaped human speech. So really, actually what's meaningful here is maybe we're finding the protein or one of the select few proteins that had a major impact on humans having the ability even to speak, which is fascinating when you think about it. What this has to do with mice. A few years ago, they played matchmaker with a male and female mouse, putting them together in a small dark cage. The male began to court the female with a series of squeaks too high-pitched for humans to hear. The ultrasonic sweet talk was unusually complex. Okay, and they at that point realized, hey, I think we found something here. The researchers had bred the mice to carry a version of a protein found only in the brain of humans. Mice without this human protein variant weren't such fancy talkers. The variant of Nova-1 protein, called 11I197V, doesn't matter, this is the gym teacher talking again, may have played an important role in the emergence of spoken language in humans. And it goes on to say, they used CRISPR to gene edit and replace the version of the gene found in mice with the human variant. The breakthrough came in that small dark cage where male mice with the human version of the protein call out to the sexy lady mice with more complex squeaks than wild-type mice. Mice with the human-type Nova-1 gene expressed more variation in tone and pitch. What was especially interesting to me, they said, was that a substitution of just one amino acid can alter such a high-level behavior in a mouse. The Nova-1 variant is nearly ubiquitous in modern humans. The team found it in all but 6 people out of 650,000, suggesting it was under strong selective pressure over 300,000 years ago. So basically, there's this protein that in mice turns them into much more eloquent talkers. That one finding, the idea that you can change one thing so small, a tiny amino acid, and have the mouse start to exhibit something that we've wondered about for a long time, which is why don't other things talk, is fascinating. So maybe they'll use AI to figure out more about this. I'm sorry for throwing this in your AI science news, but this one was so good I just had to kind of cover it. Okay, so that's it for the science news this week, month, something. I love going into how AI practically changes our world today already. A lot of people wonder if AI is just the chatbot stuff that we're seeing, or it's just the model fight, or there's a big bubble, everybody yelling about it and spending a bunch of money on something that is never going to realize anything. It absolutely will have an effect. Obviously, in science, we saw that today. Has real effects already. I mean, the day that you don't have cancer that you would have had cancer in the future, thank today. This is very early in our AI story, so it's only going to get far, far better from here, and that's why everyone is talking about AI is going to truly revolutionize science and science discovery. Things like the co-scientist that we were talking about, being able to try thousands upon thousands of experiments in one day, and just being able to guide the scientists through that instead of having to take part in each part of that. So there's just a bunch of really interesting advancements that we saw just here today. I will keep up on these stories going forward because I'm really fascinated with just the changes that AI brings all of us even already. Education is another one. I've covered a little bit over that on a different story. I think really AI is already showing itself to be highly, highly functional and useful. And we really have not even begun to move into the real AI that's going to be seen halfway through this year or by the end of this year. So hang on, it's really about to get great. Thanks for coming along on the ride for this one, and I'll see you in the next one.